why did Barry Allen do what he did at the end of season 2? Well, I think I actually have a hypothesis for that. And you're going to have to bear with me because it does consist on time travel. So, let's take our events back to season 1. When Barry first time travels back to stop his mother from dying. Now, that's the first time Barry goes back. And as we can see, that's when Barry is told not to save his mother by himself. His self told him not to save his mother because apparently he knew of the occurring events that was going to happen. But I was already in suspicion to how he knew that was going to happen. That's when season 2 falls in, to when Barry goes back in time at the end to save his mom. And he does save her. He does save her, yes. But it erases the past tense version of Barry, which had me thinking, oh, they're about to create the Flashpoint paradox where Barry doesn't have his powers and his mother's alive and all the other heroes are at war. And then I started realizing, I'm like, what about that Flash from season 1 that told Barry not to save his mother? Like, wasn't that supposed to be what happened? But it wasn't, which had me to think, of course, Barry's about to go back a third time and stop himself from saving his mother. But what happens to the second time that he goes back? What happens to the second version of him where he goes back to save his mom? Does he like beat up that version first and then he goes into the house and then he tells the first version of himself not to save his mom? That's kind of confusing because I was like, wait a second. I'm like, if he goes back 3 times, I'm like, there should be 3 Flashes in the house that night. 4 if you kind of recount the reverse Flash, but I'm just talking about the main Flash, Barry Allen's Flash. So there should be 3 Flashes in the house. The one from season 1, the one from season 2, and if Barry ends up going back in time to stop his mom from being murdered, there should be 3 in the house. So what happens to the second one? Well, I have a theory for that too. I feel like when Barry went in time, he mapped it out correctly. No, I feel like when Barry went in time and he was running through I want to say he was running through the Speed Force basically, or the paradox of times. The multiple times where he gets to see all of the times that once his past, his present, and his future at the same time. So I want to say that maybe he stopped himself. He stopped that version of himself. Then, when he arrived back to when his mother was killed, he went into the house. No, he met up with Reverse Flash, and they had their huge battle through the house. But then he sees the first version of himself that goes back the first time, and he tells that version of himself to stop because he already knows that Flashpoint Paradox is going to happen. So, but the question is, what happens to the other question? But that still raises question on what happens to the second version. Well, let's see. The first version doesn't get erased because the first version still has to play out through all of time to, I should say, progress as much as the future Barry does. But the second time that Barry goes, that second version, does that second version disappear because that time, all the stuff that he did doesn't happen anymore? And or is it that the third one disappears because the third one is actually the second one that's supposed to kill the second version of him? It's really confusing. Like, I can't even wrap my head around it. And I sit here and I try to understand it, but I think that the second time that Barry goes, that second version of him, I think the second version of him disappears, and it's the first version of him that stays in the third version of him, which is the last version. Because I think that last version of him is the one that creates the New 52 versions, or New 52. But I don't know how they would do New 52 on that show, because in fact we don't have as many characters on the show. But I did hear that Grant Gustin did say that the first episode of The Flash Season 3 will be labeled as Paradox, or was it Flashpoint? I think it was Flashpoint. So I'm a bit excited for it, and I know the rest of you are, so can't wait for that. But that's all I really want to talk about today, because I want you guys to understand how that could possibly happen. And I want to shout out my boy Eric. I'll leave his channel in the description below. He's Eric the Gamer 15. It's low key the Gamer, Eric DA Gamer. Thought it was the, but leave a like button, hit that like button, and subscribe. And Kello White out.